Hey guys, this week's video is dedicated for a special mazel tov for the Rubinger family, Daniel and Julie, on the birth of a baby boy this week. And we wish them much mazel, and we should only share in simchas. This week's parsha, Chukat, has a very interesting mitzvah. This is the commandment of the red heifer. Now before I explain what it is, in the Torah there are three categories of commandments. You have the mishpatim, you have the ones that we kind of get. We can wrap our hands around them. We get why we do them. We understand the logic behind them, or the reason, I should say, for why we have them. You have edus. You have ones that are in commemoration of an event, whether it's Shabbat or something that happens, and that's where we get those commandments. And then you have chukim, which are ones that we don't really understand the reason for. There's not a really logical explanation for that we know of, and that makes it a little more difficult. And the red heifer in this week's Torah portion is really the crown, is really the face of those types of mitzvah. So basically, the red heifer is if somebody becomes spiritually impure by coming in contact with a dead body, they had to go through a process where the ash of a totally red cow was sprinkled on them. So just off the bat, the whole concept of spiritual of impurity and purity and impurity in itself is purely spiritual concept. This isn't a physical thing, right? So even that is already a little, difficult. But what makes this unique is that the Kohen, the priest who administered this ceremony to purify that person, he himself became impure. So this process purified and impurified at the same time. King Solomon, who was the wisest of all men throughout Jewish history, was able to communicate with animals and the birds and demons. This was a mitzvah he could not crack. This was a commandment that was even beyond his grasp. And somebody who's cynical and wants to say, oh, Judaism is just the sheep following it, doesn't make any sense, this would be their case study that they would probably point to make their point. And as rational people, we like to label things either, we look at the Torah and we're like, oh, this is rational, this is irrational. But what that does is it gives us an excuse to kind of discard it. It's irrational. We're rational human beings, and if it's irrational, it gives us an excuse to say that it's not really that important. The problem with that much certainty and being that certain that something is irrational is it closes off exploring, and it's almost like closed-mindedness. You're not giving the opportunity to actually learn something new and being open to new things. Not only that, it's not really intellectually honest, because in our own lives, we do many things that are irrational and we excuse them. Whether it's eating something that we know is not good enough or going through a DMV process that makes no sense, we do many things in our lives that aren't totally rational. And it's part of our life and we're okay with it. But we should know that the red heifer and the mitzvahs like it, the commandments like it, are not irrational. They're super rational. They're above rational. Meaning we can't wrap our hands around it. God didn't give us a reason that us humans can understand. But that doesn't mean that there's no rationality. It's above rational. It's meant to demonstrate this aspect of our relationship with God, the known and the unknown, the parts that make sense and the parts that don't make sense. Our relationship with Him is not just it's not logical. We're not here. We're not still Jewish in 2021 because it makes sense. Yes, there are the mitzvahs that we can connect to and are really inspiring and we get, and they're fun, and then there are the commandments. There's those aspects of our relationship with God which are above logic. They're above human rationale. They're not any less important, they're more important. They really show where our level of faith and dedication to God is. At a Jewish wedding, there's a beautiful custom. Before the chuppah, the groom covers the face of the bride with a veil. And this demonstrates this idea of saying that I'm marrying you, and I'm marrying the revealed parts that I know about you and those parts that are hidden, those parts that I don't know. I'm marrying all of you. When we go into a long-term relationship, there are many things we're not going to know until later. And we're marrying that whole person, the strengths, the weaknesses, everything. That's the relationship, for better and for worse, right? Our relationship with God is the same way. At Mount Sinai, when we accepted God, when we entered a relationship with God, there's the revealed things, there are the good things that we understand and we can connect to and inspire. And then there are the parts of that relationship which are unknown. And at Mount Sinai, we said, God, we're connecting to all of you. We're entering a relationship with all. And it works both ways. God sticks by us even when it doesn't make sense. Even when we don't necessarily always deserve it. God says, you're my children. We're in a relationship. You stick with me even though you don't get it. I'm sticking with you even though it might not always make sense. Shabbat Shalom.